Good morning, I'm Marissa and I'm going to walk you through how to make a Leche cake today. This cake is delicious. It was one of the cakes that we had at my wedding. Actually, we had like 4 cakes I think total, but this was one of the favorites. So should be fun. Let's get going. Okay, so one of the first things we have to do is preheat the oven. So we're just going to use the regular bake setting and we're going to preheat it for 350. So start that. And then we also want to oil and flour the pan. So I've got just a 9x13 regular pan here. So just put a little bit of oil directly in your pan, maybe like a teaspoon or so. And then you can just sort of use your fingers. Of course, I wash your hands first, which I did. And just sort of rub. You want a very light coating on the pan. And don't be afraid to just jump right in. And that should be good for the oiling. And then we just want to sort of do a dusting of flour. So let me rinse my hands real quick. Okay, and then to flour the pan, we're just going to use some all-purpose flour. This is my favorite brand, King Arthur. It works really well for baking. It's a very good flour for baking. So anyway, you just want to sort of dust the pan, not too much. You don't want clumps, just sort of a light dusting. So now your cake pan is oiled and floured. It's greased up, ready for the cake. So let's start making the cake. Okay, and just a quick note here, in a little while we are going to need eggs and butter. And for this recipe, it definitely calls for the butter to be at room temperature. And typically for baking, you also want the eggs to be at room temperature, so I'm just leaving them out here on the counter until we're ready to use them. Okay, so now we're going to mix the dry ingredients. So I've got just a sifter in a bowl, because we want to sift the flour. And you need 1.5 cups of flour, so I've got a 1/2 cup here, and I'm just going to do this 3 times. And 3. Okay. And then to that, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Make sure you're using baking powder, which is in the little can, and not baking soda, which is, you know, like the Arm & Hammer in the box. They're both leavening agents, but they're not the same. So just whatever your recipe calls for, just make sure you use that. So a teaspoon of that. And then this recipe also calls for a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. Okay, so now I'm going to add the salt, just a 1/2 teaspoon. I like to do this over the sink just because it can get kind of messy. And that way I don't have to clean it up. I can just wash it down the drain, whatever I don't use. Okay, and then now you just want to sift it. So you just want to grab your sifter and just sort of shake it. And this will sift all the ingredients together nicely. And it'll also take out any clumps that are in your flour, which you really want. You want nice sifted flour. Okay, and then that's your dry ingredients, so you just want to set this off to the side, and now we'll mix our wet ingredients. Okay, so now we're ready to mix the wet ingredients, and I've got all the ingredients out here. I've got butter, sugar, which is dry, but part of the wet ingredient mixture, vanilla, and eggs. First thing you want to do is just add the butter. Simple. And I've got the paddle attachment here on my KitchenAid mixer, and I'm just going to lower this down and lock it. And then you just want to put the mixer on medium for about a minute and let the butter cream. So turn that up. Next you want to reduce the speed to low and then add your sugar. So we need 1 cup of sugar. Okay, now remember with baking, precision is important. So while the mixer's still going, there's a 1/2 cup there. And another 1/2 cup. Okay. Let that go for about a minute. And you can also use your scraper now at this point and just sort of scrape down the sides. And now you're going to add your eggs one at a time. So crack them, remember they're at room temperature. And then once again, if you want to get in there and scrape down the sides, it tends to clump a little bit. The butter will clump on the sides of the pan. Okay, and the last thing you want to add is the vanilla. So I'm going to do 1.5 teaspoons. Okay, so the cake is ready. Let's turn the oven off and the timer off. Got my oven mitts here, so just gonna slip those on and grab the cake out of the oven. And you want it to be a nice golden color, which this one is. Okay. And then all you need to do is just put it here on a baking rack and just let it cool. So you want to get it away from the oven so it doesn't keep absorbing that heat. This is far enough away, this will be fine. Okay, and then we just leave it there, and now we'll make the glaze. So let's do that. So now we're going to add the milk. So we're going to mix all this milk up. So we've got a cup of half and half. Pour that in. We got a 14-ounce can of condensed milk, sweetened condensed milk. Condensed milk is very thick and very sweet. It's delicious. Just pour that in. And then we've got a 12-ounce can of evaporated milk. Okay, so that's your 3 milks. Then we just grab a whisk and stir it up. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is poke holes in your cake. So what I've got here is a barbecue skewer, and you're just going to poke plenty of holes in the cake so you have plenty of places for the milk to go. Okay, so now our cake is cooled and we've already put the holes in it, so we just have to add the milk. So just sort of pour it evenly as possible over the cake. And you'll see it sort of start seeping in places. And now all we want to do is put this cake in the fridge, preferably for about 8 to 10 hours, so overnight. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to cover it with a little lid here. Okay, so now we're just going to put the cake in the fridge. I've already made a spot for it in here. So I'm just going to slide that right in. Okay, so now we're going to make the topping for this cake, and it's just a whipped cream topping, so you just need heavy whipping cream. I'll use 2 cups of that. Okay, and then you also need a cup of sugar. And then 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then just, you have the whisk on here instead of the paddle, so it can whisk all the ingredients. And then you just want to turn it on low and have it on low until it starts to form stiff peaks, which just means that it starts to look like whipped cream. So just be patient. Okay, so we've whipped the cream, and just in a couple of minutes we have this beautiful homemade whipped cream. And we're just going to spread that on top of our cake here. Just dump the cream on top here. Nice even layer. And that's it. You've got yourself a lovely homemade tres leche.